all the creative spaces, our round table on asexuality and that entire spectrum in all of the creative spaces out there in our world of the TTRPG community. We're going to start off just by introducing ourselves, and then we're going to jump right into it. We'll start off with Joey.
Hi, my name is Joey. Pronouns are he and him, and I'm a TTRPG content creator on Twitch and Twitter as Gnomedic.
Next up is Luciella.
Everyone, I'm Luciella Scarlett. My pronouns are she, her, and they, them. Dialing in from Melbourne, Australia. I am a writer and illustrator making tabletop role-playing games.
Next up is Sam.
Hi, I am Sam. My pronouns are they, them, and I'm a disability advocate and an accessibility director.
And then LaTia.
I'm LaTia. My pronouns are she, her, and I am a TTRPG content creator and community manager for the D&D Adventures League.
And then Lauren.
Hi, I'm Lauren. My pronouns are she, her. I am a game designer and streamer and the co-creator of the TTRPG Safety Toolkit.
Hi, and I am Squall, pronouns he, him, and you can see me around Twitter on the D&D Fitness hashtag, and also in my big campaign that I just finished running for charity out on YouTube, and hopefully with some published content coming up soon. Welcome to our panel, and we're going to jump right into this as we have a limited amount of time to talk with you. And we're just open it up as a discussion. So first thing I think we want to just chat about a little bit is just some of the Arrow, Ace, and Demi sort of myths and stereotypes that we've all bumped into out there, either in our TTRPG experiences or just being a creative content creator out there in the world. So I'm going to sort of open it up to our table and let folks sort of talk about some of the things that they've bumped into or things that they'd like to just let people know more about when being a person on the asexual spectrum. Anyone up for going first, or I can just jump right in? I'm going to go first with the one which we are not robots. I think a lot of people immediately think asexual and think emotionless. People who don't know how to experience emotions or relationships, or and certainly because of the whole spectrum that is involved with it, how to understand romance or love. And which is, I think, far from the truth for a lot of us. While we may not have that piece of sexual attraction, I know for myself, it makes some of the other things even more meaningful to me. I mean, how about some of y'all?
Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's okay. That makes so much sense and is the truest thing. Like, I love fiercely. So there's definitely kind of no, at least for me, there's no basis in that emotionless type of person. Like, I love fiercely, I feel fiercely. I may not always show it, but in here there's always a whole lot going on. I come from, like, I realized that I was on the spectrum later in life, like probably maybe 5 or 6 years ago, that I might be ace. I consider myself Demi. But yeah, like realizing it made a lot of sense. Realizing that was something that might be a part of my personality. But yeah, we're not robots. I've had relationships. At some point in the future might like to have more relationships, but it's just that I don't necessarily need that physical part of it, at least the sexual part of it, because I love intimacy. Like, cuddles are the best. Everybody cuddle. Everybody should cuddle. But yeah, I just don't need that sexual part to be fulfilled.
Yeah, I have also been missing cuddles.
Oh, man.
For me, I think so. I'm both aromantic and asexual, and the stereotype that I actually dislike most is not even the robot slash monster slash child sort of image of asexuals, but it's actually the idea of asexuals needing to be forever alone. That your happy ending, so everyone else's happy ending is this beautiful partner scene where you run off to into the sunset together. Whereas the asexuals, like in some cases, it's quite empowering. Like, I don't need anyone else. I'm an independent woman, all of that stuff. But I actually do like companions. I like cuddling. I like found family. I cry a lot when I read found family and beautiful friendships. So yeah, for me, it's asexuality and aromanticism are not about being alone. It's just a different type of, or it's all it is not feeling attraction.
That rings so true. I mean, we've now had 3 folks talk about colors. So I think one of the other ones, and I'm going to throw it over to Lauren, Sam, and Joy as well. But being ace, a lot of times we're very touch starved because of that stereotype. I mean, do you all find that as well, Joey, Sam, or Lauren?
Well, actually, I wanted to. I think what's important to talk about is that like there is no one ace experience, because I agree that a lot of times ace people, like people who aren't in relationships, can be very touch starved because the idea of physical intimacy is related to the romantic or the sexual. But like a lot of times if you say, oh, I want ace representation, the well-meaning allosexuals in your life will be like, yes, more platonic cuddling, as if the idea of ace representation is platonic cuddling, when a lot of asexual people are, and aromantic people and allosexual and alloromantic people are touch averse. And so the idea that like to represent an asexual or aromantic person is like somebody who just cuddles platonically is not that. Like, it's very uncomfortable. And also the idea that ace people don't ever have sex or can't enjoy sex, the like split between like sexual attraction versus sexual desire versus like the nerve endings firing and sending chemicals to your brain, like parts about sex. Like I'm a gray sexual person, which means that I experience occasional sexual attraction, but like that doesn't make me any less ace than a demisexual person or somebody who's totally asexual.
I can actually speak on the touch aversion, and I'm very, I don't know, I'm freshly out as ace. This has been about a year experience for me. It's a lot of education and still learning. And honestly, that is a big thank you to Tallsquall for being open about it on the Twitterverse. You had posted something a while ago, and like it was like, oh, that's a light bulb. Whoa. So, but I don't know if my aversion to touch is because of being like ASD or based on like ace. However, like things like holding hands and kissing and even cuddles are kind of like, I don't necessarily enjoy those things, and that's okay, because there are there are people on the ace spectrum that are totally open to that, and that's their thing, and that's okay. But there's also some of us who are just like, I just like being in your presence, like I just like being around you, and that's good enough for me.
I mean, I think what everyone's saying a little bit here is just like all sexuality is, it's a spectrum. I mean, Sam, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, sort of like Gnome, actually, I've only really been out for about a year as well. So it's definitely, still like a learning curve kind of in, I guess, sort of figuring out exactly what I'm comfortable with, and just sort of figuring out this new version of me. Like, it's what I've always felt like, but I never had a name or anything for it. So to, you know, have that one clock you at 31 years of age is a fun adventure to sort through. But like in terms of things like, you know, the forever alone stereotype and or the roboticism kind of thing. I'm actually I'm in a long-term relationship. I'm engaged, so that actually sort of, I guess, sort of those stereotypes made it harder for me to figure out, you know, who I am and that I am ace, because I was very much stuck in those mindsets of, well, but I'm, you know, I'm in a relationship of almost 11 years now. Wow. So it was like, yeah, I don't know. It's definitely more of, there's no monolith or anything like that. And I even oscillate wildly between sort of touch aversion and not. It changes, like even individuals are on that spectrum of sort of oscillating between what we're comfortable with and what we need, you know, day to day, moment to moment, kind of.
I think as well, I mean, I can only speak to myself, but what you've been sort of describing around the fact that once you knew you were ace, it sort of opened up a few things. And I think Joey sort of said that as well. For me, like in the past, it felt like a particular type of touch or a particular type of a relationship always led to things I was uncomfortable with, the sense that I am probably sex repulsed, or at least partly sex repulsed. But the cuddling and the potentially romance as well, even though I don't feel attraction, that sort of thing I am quite comfortable with and I actually want. So that idea, I think that there is only one way of being ace, is quite harming, definitely.
I think one of the most, sorry.
No, please.
I think one of the most harmful things for me personally, because I discovered that I was ace via Tumblr, which is just a minefield of aphobia, was the idea that ace people weren't queer. And because I, like Sam, am engaged in a long-term relationship for also almost 11 years, so go us. But I am engaged to a straight man. So for a long time, I thought that I was straight, and I thought that you could be both straight and ace. And that is extremely isolating, because I think a lot of ace people don't really feel like there is a community of aces around. Like, we don't talk about it as much because talking about being ace means that you have to talk about sex, and generally we don't want to talk about sex. So I, for a long time, thought I was straight and thought I was alone. So I think, just the myth that gets propagated that like ace people are not queer, that you can only be queer if you're ace and you have romantic attraction to somebody, you know, of the that is not hetero romantic, is extremely damaging. So that's a bad myth, and if you believe that, you're wrong.
That was something that I struggled with when I first began to suspect, because I was engaged to what we thought at the time was a straight man. what he believed he was straight at the time, and we now know that he is not. But that it began a period of discovery for both of us. Like, you know, I was beginning to feel very sex repulsed because he believing that he was a straight man, and having that feeling that if I am a straight man, this is what I need to be doing, was, you know, and everything was fine and consensual, and it was something that we were both, you know, okay with. But at the time I was beginning to feel that way, and it was frustrating him. And then I came out with that, and it was something that, you know, just kind of began that journey for both of us. I cannot tell you how he identifies. He is a beautiful rainbow of a man. But like, I struggled a lot with where I fit in the space. Like, around the time I was beginning to suspect that I really was ace, I had gone to a convention, and at all the conventions now, it's like they give you the ribbons where it's like you're either a gamer or you're an ally. And I was like looking at a gamer or an ally. Mm-hmm. And I'm looking at these ribbons and I'm like, well, I might be ace, but I don't feel like a gamer. I'm gonna take this ally ribbon, because that feeling that ace people are not queer, we don't belong in the space. It's like, I mean, it is, like Lauren said, it's really isolating.
Very much so. I think while I had self-identified, I wasn't really out until about two and a half years ago. The first time I wore my colors was at Gen Con 2018. And that June was when I sort of first really, I had kind of known my own identity probably for 5 or 6 years by that point, but unless it really someone sort of was asking or probing into what was at that point, what was wrong with me, it was very much something that I was not trying to advocate and bring visibility to. But I think as I realized more and more just how little visibility there is, and, again, coming out in a public way later in life, and even sort of discovering myself later in life, it was it was interesting just to see the number of people who still didn't realize that there was an identity that fit them, that they weren't broken, and that for most people don't even understand that there are sort of two different legs of attraction, both romantic attraction and sexual attraction. And the third leg that I would love to even bring more visibility to is aesthetic attraction. And those three things, it's a stool. For a lot of people, it's a pillar. All three things are in a line and they are inseparable. But for a lot of us, those are three very separate things and can make it very confusing. I'm homoaesthetic. I am very much aesthetically attracted to the male form, which of course in 1980s South Georgia, oh, he's gay. There's just no question. If you like looking at guys better than you like looking at girls, well, I don't want to sleep with any of them. So, it's, I think that education piece to go beyond even the romantic and sexual to romantic, sexual, and aesthetic is still a huge transition that people need to make across the both the queer spectrum and even the straight spectrum, to understand that it's okay to be sexually straight, but bi aesthetic. That's perfectly okay, and it's okay being, or even homoaesthetic but be sexually straight is still fine. It's just, I think it's a huge education or knowledge piece that is missing, that I'm hoping that part of us doing this and other folks through all the different formats that we have can bring more attention to.
Yeah, I like to make the joke that we have Ace Awareness Week in October, and it's a week long because that is how long it takes to explain the difference between romantic and sexual attraction. And then, like, if you want to talk about aesthetic attraction, I think that's like a whole other week, honestly. Maybe we need to.
Just give us a month.
Right?
I mean, I know for me at least, like, sort of having that realization of, oh, there's a difference, just was mind-blowing. And in my case, at least, that was very much what made things sort of start to click and fall into place. Like, that aesthetic and romantic attraction is not equivalent to sexual attraction. And I definitely think if that is something that just society as a whole can build on, and especially just if that's something that, I don't know, even within specifically the LGBTQ community, like we can just sort of discuss more openly as like a thing, I think would be wonderful.
For sure.
Yeah, I think if we think about the LGBTQ community and the words that make up those the alphabet soup, like they're all sexual. They all have we have your homosexuals, you have your bisexuals, we have your pansexuals, and then aromantics are just like chilling in the in the romantic section, and this idea that like everything about queerness is related to how you experience sexual attraction. I mean, even as asexuals, that's how we define ourselves, by like how we experience sexual attraction, when like it's so ingrained. It's so hard for people to split that up. When like, yeah, if you are bisexual, there's a chance you are also biromantic, but you don't call yourself biromantic bisexual. You just call yourself bisexual and assume everybody knows that means romantic.
Right.
Just real quick, speaking of, the LGBTQ acronym, that A, just general PSA, is not for ally. Just putting that out there right now.
Yeah.
There are like 3 AI identities that it could be, and none of them are allies.
Yeah, exactly.
Sexual, aromantic, agender.
There you go.
No allies.
No ally.
The allies hold the quilt bag.
Right.
The allies shut up and let us talk.
Right, exactly.
Just had to get that one off my chest.
Oh, absolutely. It actually makes for a good transition for us into sort of our next big topic that we want to talk about, which all of us being creators or doing creative things, making content out there, is, how you yourself can write or incorporate Ace, Arrow, and Demi themes into your work, educating other people on how they can help have visibility inclusion in their work. And also we have a very intersectional group here amongst us, and how that all can sort of blend together to help visibility in general. I think that's the biggest thing that we can take from that. Our first little section there is just how alone we all felt for so long. And even before this started, we were talking a little bit about, hey, what's some media that has great asexual representation? And all of us were like, So, I want to go ahead and throw it out there. I mean, who wants to start? Joey, we haven't heard from you in a while. And I know you've been creating all sorts of great stuff lately.
I mean, as far as like making characters in TTRPGs and portraying them, my default is Ace, period. That's when safety tools are involved, and safety tools should always be involved in games, especially when it comes to like lines and veils. Usually like romantic stuff or sexual content is usually pretty veiled for like me, but like other characters can have it. Like I love watching other people have romantic lines. Like, it's great, get your smooches on. It's not for me, and it's not going to be for my character. And it's certainly been interesting, because the thing when it comes to especially like performing in front of an audience, or you have a product or something that is in front of an audience, the audience loves to just ship things, to put people in ships, to put characters in ships. And that's great. I love it. I do it too. But if I'm telling you that my character is Ace, whether you're a player or the DM at the table or somebody who's participating, respect that. Like, don't put my character in this other situation hoping that it's gonna, fanfare, right? Like, don't do that. Don't do that. Just respect it. The character's ace, the character's ace.
Agree. Just like Joey, by default, my characters are black, left-handed, and ace. Which is a whole other can of worms, because when you consider character creation, there's so little black fan art out there, or black art in general. Like, we have to actually spend the money to commission people, which is fine doing that. But, when you're just thinking about what a character looks like, it's like, well, I got to go find something that I can give this artist. And then there's no black art. But that's besides the point. As a romantic asexual or a demisexual, which is an asexual who must form very, very close bonds with somebody before they can consider, romantic attraction or a relationship of any kind. At least that's how I define it. My characters are all that. Like, I'm absolutely for the romance, but similar to Joey, anything further than that is going to go behind that veil or not happen at all, depending on the relationship that I feel my character may have with a different character. So by default, that is a factor in playing games with me. And then when I write characters, I try to make sure, romance so often does not factor into anything that I write, whether it be like one shots or just any sort of media where there is a character. Like, romance doesn't really factor in. So, but if I wrote it, you can pretty much be assured that a good half to 75% of the characters are going to be ace in some way.
I think I'm a little bit of an opposite for this, because I really enjoy playing characters who are intentionally allosexual, or ace characters who do have sex, but for non-attraction reasons. But it is always like very intentional, because to me, looking at somebody and being like, I would like to do a sex with you, sir, is about as imaginary in my head as like casting a fireball spell is. Like, it's the same. It's not real. But it does have to be like a very intentional thing. I usually decide ahead of time, this character is allosexual. This character likes to have sex with people and will have sex with usually everybody. Usually I don't have like a in between. It's like 0 or 60, because that's just fun and interesting to me. But I think for playing an ace character, the starter version is like to just not have sex or romance in your game, and then it just never comes up. But that's not like really representation. For me, what is romantic ace representation is like having uncomfortable conversations with potentially allosexual partners about like, I love you, but I am never going to look at you and want to have sex with you. That doesn't mean we're never going to have sex, but it means that this is something that you're going to have to work through, because I'm never going to look at you and think you're hot, or I find you sexually attractive. And we don't like to have those conversations, especially when we put sexual content behind a veil. If we are using like a lines and veils system, all of a sudden that takes all discussion of sex off the table. And so I think you kind of have to be open to having awkward conversations. If you veil, because veiling sex means I would not like to role play the mechanical aspects of sex, but it doesn't necessarily mean that like I don't want to ever discuss sex at all.
That's a point that I had not considered previously, and I do think the awkward conversations are like entertaining. As you watch two characters who have never experienced that, or even two people who have never experienced that, try to navigate that whole thing, like that is, it's very good to watch. It's very wholesome to watch. So that is something that I had not considered, and thank you for that.
Yeah, I think for me, I haven't really explored a lot of sort of asexuality in tabletop role playing personally. And I mean, maybe that's something I'll try in future, but for me, it's funny, after we all just had this conversation about the importance of representation, but to a certain extent, I want to be able to play games where being asexual is not a big deal, where I don't even have to be out because it isn't assumed that you would have sex. Because let's say it's a world where even allisexual people actually have an upfront conversation about what a relationship would consist of. And so to me, it's like when I think of media where I feel like as an asexual person, I could exist in that world, it doesn't even necessarily need to have asexual characters. It needs to have a view on relationships which is quite broad, which allows different types of people to exist. And I say, for example, Legend of Zelda, which has no canonical ace rep as far as I know. Link is my headcanon, but what it does have is a world in which platonic relationships are valued. Yes, there's sort of hints at sexuality and romance in that world, but it's not sort of assumed generally that that's something that everyone experiences, and it's also not assumed that sexual and romantic relationships are the pinnacle that we all need to be working towards. That's not the end goal of those games. And to me, when I am creating my own worlds and my own games, yes, sometimes it's about putting actual asexual characters in there and calling them asexual, but a lot of the time it's just thinking about how those relationships operate and what that world values, I guess.
Oh, for sure. One of the things I'm exploring in my world right now is that in sort of the creation myth, the earliest races were the dwarves and the dragonborn, and the dragonborn are very much along those lines. Reproduction is just about reproduction, and it is a discussion. It was actually two male dragonborn who are kind of the Adam and Steve of this world, and it is who wants to carry the eggs, who wants to do this, because we don't know what dragonborn are. In these cases, these sort of primordial dragonborn are very amorphous in their even the way they were dragons, and they became dragonborn because they wanted to sort of have this sort of more humanoid form to be able to interact with the dwarves. And so then it was who wants to carry the eggs? Do we want to have kids? Do we not want to have kids? But their relationship was, and even their lineage was not in any way based off of either gender or based on sexual reproduction. So even though they did reproduce.
Yeah. If I can, because I think giving specific examples is probably a good idea. I'll give two maybe. So I have a world that I've developed called Phaela, we're in a tabletop role-playing game called Coven, which doesn't have marriage. It specifically says in the rules, marriage does not exist in this universe, which, I mean, I don't mean that as an insult to anyone who has been married, but marriage is sort of this idea that there is a relationship hierarchy which doesn't exist in this world. In another game, I made a visual novel where you have, there's an option where a character wants to just give you a hug, and you have the option of saying no to that. which, yeah, because I love hugs, but not everyone does. So I think giving, like, as you say, giving sort of these examples in the world, these signposts of the fact that relationships don't have to follow a particular pattern to be valid.
Yeah, because for me at least, it's only in the last year or so that I've really come to terms with at least that label of being ace. It's only in the last year that I've been able to really start incorporating it into characters. I had been sort of experimenting with it subconsciously, I guess, before that, you know, like you do. But for me at least, I mean, I'm just gonna say I'm freaking ship trash. I love that stuff. And
Same, to be honest.
right? Like, that was sort of another thing where it was, you know, there's misconceptions about what being ace means sort of made me question that, because I was like, is loving trashy like fanfic and stuff? Does that mean I'm not really asexual? I don't know. And now it's really nice to sort of get to explore that with my characters, who also by default are always asexual. Either aromantic or panromantic, usually panromantic because that's what I am. And I'm still just sort of enjoying being able to explore that into these identities for me. And just sort of speaking, like, I'm also somebody who loves those awkward conversations, especially in like the context of role play. Like I have a PC who is right now pretty much grappling with their first romantic crush like ever. They're ace, they're very touch averse, and they just had to ask a party member for dating advice, and it did not, it was so adorably like they also have bad anxiety, and it was just this total sort of train wreck of just words. You know, but it was a really cathartic experience because like that was not too much role playing really necessary for that. Like that, everybody pretty much just got a shot of like Sam trying to navigate that. And that was very cathartic for me, at least.
Well, it brings up a good point, especially when we talk about those awkward discussions. I mean, many of us, you know, role play is a way for us to sort of try on some of these things that we're going to or have already experienced in real life, and either might have wished they'd gone differently, or that, you know, that awkward conversation that you get to have in D&D, you know, can help you. I mean, you know, a lot of us, you know, sort of joke, but it is kind of true. You know, role play is therapy, you know, and it's a way for you to try on that conversation of hey, I am finding myself in a, you know, more than just friends relationship with this person, but I also need to understand who I am and the way that this works with me in order to have that relationship grow, or again, not to make sure that it's not, you know, that there aren't mistakes that are made or feelings that are hurt later on down the road.
I think something that I've never actually got to roleplay as an experience, but I think would be interesting to explore as somebody who does like to play kind of more emotionally heavy games that are less like, haha, this is an awkward conversation, and like this is an awkward conversation that is hard and painful, is the idea of unenthusiastic consent. And like, shameless self-promotion, I wrote a series of micro games for asexual characters called Aromantic. You can get it on itch.io under Starving Soubrette. That's my one plug. But one of these games is about being in a relationship with an allosexual person who wants to have sex. And it's my personal belief that you shouldn't be beholden to like one person's desire or the other, you know, or another person's lack of desire, because that's going to make both people unhappy. And so sometimes you just do it. Even though you don't want to, you know, you can kind of make yourself get there. But that's a very, it can be very triggering. For a lot of people, it is something that requires like the right table, the right set of safety tools. But I feel like when we talk about sex in role-playing games, it's always like 100% enthusiastic consent, and people talk a lot about like sex should always be enthusiastic 100% all the time, which is true in a lot of cases. But I think unenthusiastic consent is a part of a lot of ace people's experiences, and I would love to find a way where everybody could like kind of safely explore that harder time in a game, because the stakes are lower, because it's not going to ruin your relationship.
Right.
It's just
I get it. I also just want to say, just because I know that there may be some people who watch this and think negatively about unenthusiastic consent, that does not mean non-consensual.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. No, and I know that that's what you mean, but I just want to point that out for people who are watching this and they think unenthusiastic consent means that you don't want to, but you're going to do it anyway. Like, that's what it means, but it's not saying you're not being forced to do it. It's just, it's a little tricky.
Yeah,
it's a nuance.
It's very nuanced. And as someone who has been unenthusiastically consensual in some things during that transitional period of my life, it is absolutely not non-consensual. You will find, you may find, I won't say you will, but you may find some enjoyment in it, but it is not like all parties are still consenting, even though you may not be entirely happy with it.
Yeah, it's like if you're hungry and somebody really wants pizza and you don't really want pizza, but like it's super important to them that they get pizza right now, and you're like, okay, I will eat the pizza. And then you eat the pizza and it's not bad. It doesn't make you sick. You don't feel like awful after you eat the pizza. You just would have rather had something else.
Exactly. Like you really wanted a burger.
Yeah, no,
pizza.
It's a really complicated one, which I think, I mean, you're right. It'd be interesting to do that in the game, specifically with other asexual people, because I feel a lot of that conversation actually gets kind of dominated by not asexual people. So, yeah, it is complicated.
Well, that actually, we were going to talk about safety, about safety systems and shipping. So we kind of we jumped right through that one. But no, I think that life experience is again a lot of what's missing, and I think it's the nuance, as Lauren was saying earlier, about even the safety tools. You know, there is the okay, we're going to put this behind a veil. And a lot of times you end up putting a lot of things adjacent behind a veil as well. Sometimes intentionally, sometimes not, which can mean that you don't get to explore some of those uncomfortable spaces. And I don't know how to, and I'm actually really glad since, to have Lauren here. I don't know the right way to say that you sometimes neuter your experience too far. I don't know how to say this correctly, so before I get myself into trouble, I'm going to hand over the mic.
You're muted, Lauren.
Sorry about that. Thank you. Yeah, I think when you're talking about safety, and when you're talking about experiences, people sometimes think safety tools are kind of like cushions to protect you from all of the bad things in the world, so you only have a fun, happy, positive experience, which they can be used for that, and they're great when they're used for that. But part of the reason that people started talking about safety tools and creating safety tools was to navigate those kind of difficult experiences. And there are some games that we play to be uncomfortable on purpose. Bluebeard's Bride is one that I can think of off the top of my head. Like, that is a game that is meant to make you feel uncomfortable. It is in the principles of the game. And so I think it takes the right table. It takes the right set of tools, because there are lots of tools and some work better for some people than others, to figure out exactly how far you can go into these difficult conversations and uncomfortable moments, knowing that you can always pull back later on.
Yeah, I can actually speak on that. I only just recently had just one character that ended up having a romantic interest, and it took 23 episodes, about 2 to 3 hours each, for them to even barely eventually have like that kiss moment. And what's really interesting is something we discuss is constant communication. Your lines, your veils can shift all the time. Be active in a chat with each other. Be active as a group, because your table's involved, the GM is involved. Like, as transparent as possible, and that allowed me to have that safe feeling, right, to be comfortable exploring something like that, because it's something I'd never done before in a TTRPG game. And then also, it's a sci-fi game, and things like when you play fantasy, when you play sci-fi, like, it's not just like humans, right? It's not just that's the only thing that's there. Like, loving somebody doesn't have to be physical. The situation may not call for it. The culture of whatever world you're in may not call for it. And that's okay. And it's really fascinating and interesting to explore. And I'm just really grateful to have had a table that allowed me the space to explore that, because it doesn't have to be that love, that connection wasn't going to be any more physical than just that, because it didn't need to be. The connection between the characters were already there.
And I think to sort of bring that back to our panel and being Arrow and Ace is that communication, especially when you do have an Arrow or Ace or Demi player who, just because they're, to have that that safe place, but also that us wanting to explore something that doesn't invalidate our identity, because I know certainly I've experienced through the years, I think I'm the oldest amongst us by a lot, but there's always you did this, therefore you're obviously not Ace, you're obviously not asexual, because you shouldn't be even thinking about sex. You shouldn't even be, why would you say you're Arrow, but you say you want to hold someone's hand? That's a romantic thing. It seems like there's always someone, one night with me and you'll not even know how to say asexual anymore. There's always those people out there who, no, I've had that said to me actually more than once.
I laugh because it hurts.
Oh,
inside.
yeah, no. So I think it's a very frightening place, I think, for a lot of us, because we've had so many bad experiences with just opening the door a crack, and suddenly it becomes proof to invalidate your identity. And the asexuals don't really exist, and so I think I said in another interview earlier this year, just holding someone's hand can be one of the most dangerous things for an asexual, because so many times before in our overly sex saturated culture, you look at someone's eyes too long, you hold their hand, well, you're having sex. 2 hours till sex, to the sex,
I gotta feel like you understand that from like a masculine perspective, right?
Yes.
Like if we could even touch on that for a second. Like, so
Oh, yeah.
I'm a trans mask, and that pressure to everything has to be sexual.
Oh, yeah.
How something is very wrong with you
Oh,
if you don't find that person hot, or you haven't done this yet.
Oh.
What do you mean you've not done this? How? Well, you're not a dude then. Like,
oh, for sure. I mean, it was very, high school, college. I mean, basically, truly, it was easier for me to let people default think that I was a repressed homosexual than that I wasn't interested in having sex. And remember, this is the 80s, the 90s, where being gay was still a big, well, in the 80s, you were disease ridden. I mean, I was in high school at the height of AIDS. And so not only were you gay, and, I was in South Georgia, so gay, going to hell, and a biohazard. Because even though I insisted I'd never been with anybody, of course I was lying. Because everyone's had sex or wants sex, and the gays, boy, they have sex all the time because, that's what they do. Like I said, to college, it was sort of the same idea. Luckily there, I was at an engineering school where I could just be a geek and be studying all the time, and, had greasy hair and acne, so it was pretty easy. And then, I think probably my biggest challenges were when I did in my 30s, it was my 30s before I started getting in shape and doing cosplay, and then especially doing fitness cosplay, where I was doing, many costumes that showed off my physique and showed off my body. And the cosplay community is very promiscuous. They just are. There's a fetish community that's involved in that. There's just a lot of sex in the cosplay community. And the fact that I was going to bed at 10 o'clock because I'd been up all day in costume and walking a con floor. And that I was going to bed alone, or usually had a room alone, just inconceivable. And especially as a man. And that when I had women throwing themselves at me, that I, had nothing to do, and then would have men throw themselves at me and had nothing to do with them. Like I said, it was, from the masculine side, it was, I was very convinced for 3 decades I was just broken. I can tell you the number of times that I used to tell people, it's because I'm the psycho one in the relationship. I'm broken. I don't do well in relationships. I don't know how to have a relationship because I'd never been in a relationship that wasn't immediately sex-based. So
I think it's really harmful to people raised like feminine or raised as girls as well, because growing up as a girl, I was told boys only want one thing, and that's what they hear. And I can't imagine what it's like to be a little boy growing up hearing that you only want one thing and then not wanting that one thing. That sounds terrible. But it also is part, and there's a lot of intersections about toxic masculinity in here too, but it's part of the reason why you're so, as a femme person, I'm so wary around masculine people, because you get this thing ingrained in your head that's they only want one thing. They're only talking to you because they want to have sex with you. And it's so bad. It hurts everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Really messed. I know it really messed me the heck up. So yeah.
And I went to a Catholic girls' school where they did their best to tell us that everyone was asexual, at the school at least. And then I left the school, and turns out that's not true.
Yeah. Or the sex ed, where it's you cannot have sex until you're married, and then it is imperative that you have sex.
Yeah.
Once
then
you
you owe sex. Yeah.
Yeah.
We could go on and on and on and on and on and on and on.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot.
There is so much, and I'm hoping that we can all get together again, because believe it or not, we are almost out of time already. I do want to have a quick chance to quickly roll around everybody and just any final thoughts that folks might have in our last about 3 minutes that we've got. I'm just so happy that we got to have this conversation, and I really do hope to that we can bring this with even more topics to share with folks at another either con, either virtually or live soon. While we go down through our normal Joe.
Final thoughts. You're not broken. You're not a robot. I lived most of my life feeling those things, and it's not true. It's just not true. You can still love, and you could still be loved.
Luciella.
Last thoughts. Will, want, won't lists are amazing. Look them up. Pretty much create a list of things you want in a relationship, things you will do in a relationship, things you won't do in a relationship. You can do that either for an actual relationship or for a tabletop role-playing game. I think that's a really good way of actually setting boundaries up front.
Great. Sam.
You can be ace and still enjoy your trashy romance novels and dirty jokes. You are still 150% valid.
LaTia.
Sam stole what I was going to say. I am grateful to have an opportunity to talk to all of you. Sam, you and I need to talk because we probably need to talk like trashy romance and shipping and all of that.
Oh, yes.
I get it on this.
Yeah, me too.
To everybody watching, your version of asexuality, aerosexuality, demisexuality, is valid. You see here, there is absolutely no one way to be the way that you are. And, if you're still finding your way, there's so much, like, you don't have to be in that box, that you are beautiful people, all of you.
Lauren.
Yeah, in the advocacy work I do, I think a lot of people aren't sure whether they're ace, and I always tell them, if you think that you're ace, you're probably ace. And if you think you're ace and you call yourself ace and then you find out later that you're something else, that's okay. But like, you're allowed to call yourself something, and you're allowed to seek out other people who have the same experiences as you. And I recommend it.
I think my last words are just to remember that there are 3 legs to the attraction table: sexual, romantic, and aesthetic. And with that, I think we're going to say goodbye, and thank you all for tuning in. Theoretically, we were in the chat, so we've been interacting with you while you watch this. And everyone, be safe out there. Don't forget to love each other, and we hope to see you at another con sometime soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.